Okay. So, okay, now you know how to render everything on the server. Okay. Okay, Next.js does that. It renders everything on the server. So it also comes with a problem, right? So now that if you are rendering everything on the server, right? Your HTML, your CSS, everything is rendered on the server, then sent to your client. But if you want interactivity with your client, like if you want to click a button or change a route and show different data, how do you do that? Because everything is rendered from the server, you cannot interact directly from the client, or your with your JavaScript you cannot directly go to your server and render everything. Okay, so that's actually that doesn't serve. What is the purpose of React then if you have to render everything with each what is it, integration, or whenever your user triggers a event? So that's why we actually have static site generation, right? Sorry, not static site generation. We have our incremental static generation, right? So what is incremental static generation? So it is actually a bit different from your normal server-side rendering. So how is it different? So whenever you are using server-side rendering, your application or everything you get from the server is actually static. So let me go to that website again. Okay, so when you have built this application with Next.js, right? So when you deploy this application, everything you're rendering with server side is actually built on the server, right? All of these data are already built on the server. So if you want to change something, right? If something changes, or when you get data from your API data might change. So you might not get the same data each time from your API. So if you have to change that, show that change on your front end or your application, you actually have to build that application again to show that changes, because this data is already built on the server with your request, right? Which is request whenever you are building your application, the everything is already generated on the server. So if you have any changes in your API data, so how do you make the changes? You have to build your application again. So actually this comes with a hassle that how do you know when your API data will change, and you have to have a developer has to constantly ready for API data, and you have to build it again. So you cannot do that with everything, right? So if you know that your data won't change, like your data is static and your application data won't be changing, then you can use the server-side rendering or your static site generation. That means everything will be static, and you won't be change everything very frequently. Like your data will change in a month or 2 months or 15 days, and in 15 days or a month you will be changing your data, right? Okay, guys, can you give me a second, please? Sorry. Okay, sorry. So where was I? Okay. So whenever you have to change something from your API data, you have to build it again, right? So that's why we have this incremental static site generation. That means you can tell Next.js that, okay, so render everything in the server, but you can tell Next.js that I want to build everything in 3 days, or in 2 days, or 30 seconds, or 1 minute. So whatever the time you decide, you can actually tell Next.js that it generate all of these in server side, but I want to my data might change, so I want to rebuild it in every 10 second or every 30 seconds. So as you can see, we have our get static site props function. So you do not have to understand this function right now. So if we have our static site get static props, and if we go to our return function, you can see we are saying the revalidate. So what is this revalidate to 10? That means we are setting up in milliseconds. That means every 10 seconds this website will be built again. So your Next.js server, what your Next.js server will do, okay, I have got static data and it will build everything on the server during build time, but after every 10 second or whatever time you enter here, 10 second, 3 days, 1 days, 1 minute, whatever you put here, Next.js will actually rebuild the whole application with your new data. Okay, so that is one way to handle this, your server-side generation. All right. All right. Okay, so now we know what is client side rendering, what is static side generation, and what is server side rendering, and also what is incremental static generation, right? So all of this might seem complex to you or complicated to you, but when you are working on a actual project and you are working with your developer team, your project manager, they will the business will actually give you the requirements of when what data will change frequently and which pages will need SEO optimization. So based on your use case, you might need to implement all any of these four applications or four methods of rendering. So for server-side rendering, the page is rendered on each request at the server and sent to browser with fully formed HTML. So that is what server-side rendering is, right? So whenever you reload this page, the server will build you the HTML and give you the data each time with each request. So whenever you reload, the server gets a request, it builds the HTML, CSS, and everything and gives it back to you. So that is what server-side rendering, right? So best use cases are dynamic content that needs to change per request. For example, user dashboard authentication pages, right? So that means user dashboard might change frequently. So you have some charts, your pie charts, your analytics, something. So these might change each time. So you want to implement the server-side rendering. That means I want to render everything on the server, but whenever I reload, I should get new data. Like it should build again. That is server-side rendering, right? So it will build your application or all the pages during the build time, but each time you reload or come to the same page, it will be built again and sent to you. Okay, so that is server-side rendering. So this is close to client-side rendering. In this case, everything is rendered on the client in client-side rendering, but with each reload, everything is updated. But with server-side rendering, everything is updated, but not on the client, on the server. Okay. In Next.js, we have to use the get server-side props to use server-side rendering. Okay, got that. We'll cover that later. And we also have our static site generation. That means the page is generated at build time and serves as a static file. That means when your application is complete and you build application, a static page will be built and it will be stored in your server. So whenever you request this page will be rendered to you, right? So with each reload, this page won't change. So doesn't matter after build time, how many times you reload, you will get the same data, right? The server will show you the same page that was built. It won't rebuild the application or the web page. Okay, so that is server-side rendering. So it is used for static pages like blogs. Okay, your blog pages doesn't change that much. Your marketing websites and your documentations. So your documentations, blogs, these pages usually do not have that many changes, right? So you can use these. And then we have our client-side rendering. That is what React does. So this page is rendered entirely on the browser after HTML is loaded, fetching dynamic content with JavaScript, right? So you come to the website, React web application. First, your HTML is loaded with nothing, just a script tag. And inside the script tag, we have our JavaScript. And then the JavaScript bundle actually dynamically fetches all the data or actually renders everything on your client. So apps that need heavy interactions like loading space, right? So client-side applications are actually great for user interactions. You have a lot of user interactions, you have forms, you have buttons. So for those types of applications, you have to use client-side rendering, right? So that's why React became very popular because you could easily create very interactive web applications, right? Okay, so you have use effect and use state hook for that. And a problem that you get with static site generation, right? So you do not want to use the server side generation, the server side rendering, right? So you do not want to rebuild the page each time you send a request to the server. Okay, so you do not want to do that. but you want to use the static site generation. That means you want to build it once, but also your data might change, right? So you want a static site generation, but you also have to consider that your data might change. So that's when you use increment static generation. That means I want my static site. So each time I give the user the static site that you have built when build time, but you can set up a timer that after 5 minutes reveal the application. Okay, so now the user will get data with your static site, but it won't be updated data in like your 5 minute breaks. So after 5 minutes, user will get new data. Okay, all right. So when do you use incremental static generation? Pages that need occasional updates. Okay, you do not need update with each load. That means it needs occasional updates. That means your data might not change that often. Your data might change like each day or in an hour. So that's when you want to use the incremental static generation. So we have a get static proc function that we will use in Next.js to make our incremental static generation. All right.